Dan and Amy, Governor Ronner delivered his State of the State address yesterday, and, he said he's quite optimistic about the state of Illinois or its future.
I am deeply optimistic about the future of our beloved Illinois.
I'm not sure that there's so much to be optimistic about, but you have to be an optimist, I guess, to stay on this side of the abyss. He reiterated his call for structural reforms of state government.
Our state's economy could take off like a rocket ship if we could just come together on major pro-jobs changes that need legislation to take effect.
And then he struck the note of bipartisan compromise, implicitly indicating that the state is so poor, so financially bad off, that he can't even afford to use G's on the ends of his gerunds.
Please keep working. Please keep trying. The people of Illinois need you to succeed.
Mm-hmm. Working, trying, getting on. And did Ronner move the needle at all with his remarks yesterday? The State of the State, his budget address coming up February 15th. We'll put that question to our friend Kristen McQueary, she of the Chicago Tribune editorial board, who joins us now. Kristen, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
So your impressions of Ronner's speech, and I know you're a professional on the Chicago Tribune editorial board, so you don't do impressions, but your review.
I always get stuck when I have to use a quote of his when he is dropping his G's, because I refuse to actually print that as quoted. But, I mean, the State of the State address is always just kind of a chance for the governor to have an hour to brag about his or her record, and that's kind of what this one was. The optimistic tone is no different than his last two State of the State addresses, and as you mentioned, the real meat and potatoes will come on February 15th when he introduces a budget, and we'll see kind of what his plan is to get us out of this mess.
So, Kristen, what did he brag about? What did he tout as his accomplishments so far?
Well, it's interesting because it's tough for him. He doesn't have a long list. The biggest accomplishment, I think many of us would say, is that he has stood firm and he hasn't given in to Democratic demands. But that's not really something that you can put on a campaign flyer or in a speech. He did talk about stronger ethics reforms. He talked about, he mentioned the 20 labor agreements that he has struck with other unions, and those contracts are based on performance and not seniority. He does have some inner workings of government type accomplishments, but that's kind of it. It's a short list, and I actually had a chance to talk to him afterward, and I posed that question to him. If you look at your win column, it's pretty paltry compared to what you came in hoping to do. And he sort of took issue with the premise of that question and said that he's done a lot to change the culture of government in Springfield, and that's not maybe visible to someone like you or me.
Well, I think one of the things he can rightly say is he's changed the culture in terms of having a governor who is willing to stand and fight against the established political order. Now, he's been wavered sometimes, and I think he's wavering right now with respect to this unholy deal that Radonio and Cullerton are trying to forge. But he has done that, and that is different than previous governors, Republican and Democrat, in my lifetime, who have, come together to achieve a bipartisan compromise that further decimates Illinois' financial underpinnings and economic possibilities. So not going along with some iteration of Madigan's bull jive $7.5 billion unbalanced budget last year, that is an accomplishment because most other governors have seen Madigan and Cullerton and the established political order get the best of them.
That's right. I mean, he didn't bring up some of those issues in the speech because I think he's trying to set a conciliatory tone, but he vetoed the first budget that they sent him. So I haven't seen any governor do that, and it set the stage for basically Armageddon and a standoff between the two parties. But I would argue that there is a point where he has to swallow hard, and in government, sometimes you have to pick the best, worst plan. And this is not a time for him to kick in the teeth whatever sort of progress is emerging from the Senate, in my opinion. Cullerton, the Senate president, has blinked on one of his major talking points over the past 2 years that you cannot combine budget items with non-budget items, which, of course, is a silly argument. But here you have Cullerton working with Republican leader Christine Radonio on a set of bills that explicitly link the budget to non-budget items. So I don't think he should throw cold water at these talks right now. These bills are very fluid. They're changing by the day. There's something in there to hate for everyone. But sometimes in government, you swallow hard and you try to move the ball forward, and I think that's what he's doing.
Yeah, well, and we disagree on this. I mean, in that Tribune editorial about don't do something, don't do nothing, essentially, regardless of what that something is. Boy, I don't understand that. And let's talk about that deal that's on the table where Ronner has essentially stood on the sidelines and watched it play out to this point. Illinois is in recession, effectively. I mean, there are regions of the state that COGFA actually says are in recession formally, but the state has been languishing for 2 generations. And against that backdrop, they're proposing to increase the state income tax by 33% to nearly 5%, just under. Corporate tax to 7%. Create this new business opportunity tax, which I love that Orwellian term.
That's already off the table, but go ahead.
But this is what they've proposed. 200 and proposed in a vacuum, where the governor should be weighing in on these things, in my opinion. $225 to $15,000 fee for every business in the state based on the size of your payroll, regardless of whether you made a profit or not in a particular year. And we're going to talk about how we're going to grow Illinois, grow this economy, and in exchange for that, you get illusory workers' comp reform, prospective term limits for legislative leaders, and a 2-year Swiss cheese property tax freeze that we've been having property tax freezes and caps that home rule communities can obviate anyway. That's a joke. That further destroys this state's economy.
Okay, let me weigh in here. All of these proposals are fluid. They are being amended as we speak. There's no other way to get anything to the governor's desk unless you get buy-in from the Democrats. And if Rauner weighs in right now on any of these proposals, they are going to back off. It is a democratically controlled legislature. You have to work with them. I think it's the moral thing to do. I'm not saying, and the editorial, by the way, did not say we are on board with any one of the planks that they are talking about. We are simply saying keep talking. Like I said, they are being amended as we speak. It would still have to go to the House if it even gets out of the Senate. And I think it's right for the governor to stand back and let these conversations happen. And I would remind you, Dan, last year, you backed a stopgap budget. You thought that was a moment where the governor should swallow hard and sign it. And that's exactly what they did. We're bleeding $14 million a day because they kicked the can for 6 months. But you were okay with that at that moment, which was also a very bad move for the governor to do.
No, it actually wasn't. It actually wasn't, and I'll tell you why. I mean, he put himself in a difficult position because he didn't make the ground fertile to take on CPS, and that's what has to happen. You have to make the ground fertile. You have to make arguments. You have to leverage the bully pulpit, and that's where the governor has failed, and his communication staff has failed miserably, and he's clearly getting bad advice from them, and he's taking it, unfortunately. But a 6-month stopgap so you don't have to dig in and have the battle royale with Chicago and CPS was the path of least resistance for that time. But now we're talking about structural things with state government. And, the idea that he should continue talking runs afoul of your review of the AFSCME negotiations, where everybody sits around a table posturing and pretending that they're going to do something when the sides are philosophically so far apart that there is no common ground that is forgeable. So you either have to say, I'm going in this direction and provide the executive leadership that's demanded of a governor, or you negotiate the terms of your surrender, which is what Christine Radogno is doing and Republicans have done for 30 years, which is why they're in the super minority, generally speaking, against the backdrop of Chicago Democrats like Madigan and Cullerton, who've been there for 80 years and have destroyed the state's economy, but have not been held accountable by voters because you've completely eliminated the distinction between the two parties for much of that time.
If you had a Republican-led Senate and House, you can do those kinds of things. But as I said, there's no other way. You have to work with Democrats. Of these 13 proposals, it does include pension reform. It does include some workers' comp. Does it go far enough? No, it doesn't. But I'm sorry, I do not think this is the time to kick them in the teeth when you have some sort of discussion happening.
Why is this about Democrats and Republicans? Why is this not about the impact that those proposals would have on this state? You tell me what you think a 30% hike in the income tax and corporate tax and this business opportunity tax or a sugary drink tax or whatever other creative ways to extract people's wealth from them will have on a state that is already seeing people flee at record numbers, GDP with them, and piling up unfunded liabilities that the Democrats are perfectly content to continue piling up because, again, they haven't been chastened at the ballot box. The way you go from minority or super minority to majority is not to capitulate, it's to fight.
I don't see this as a capitulation. I'm not singularly focused on the tax proponents, the tax part of what is in these bills. There are 13 bills total. Some of them do get what they want. And the reason you have to do this is because there are a lot of people down in Springfield, Dan, who don't agree with your ideas or my ideas of how to get the state on the right track.
Clearly.
Look at how the governor. Well, exactly. So, we keep sitting and staring at each other and bleeding out $14 million a day. Or you figure out a way to work with them.
But if you're in the minority like the Republicans are, you have to work with them. How can you fight them? I mean, tell me, give Governor Ronner.
This is what's fascinating: the courage to concede the ideas to people whose ideas and policies we've been pursuing for a half a century, and look where Illinois finds itself. So that's courageous. The courage to tax, the courage to continue spending, the courage to take fleeting faux reforms in exchange for fleecing the taxpayers. That's courageous. But standing your ground and say, no, you want to do it, Madigan and Cullerton? You have majorities. You have a supermajority in the Senate, Cullerton. Go pass it. I'm not participating in the continued bankrupting of this state. I am not going to be a manager of your going out of business sale for the state of Illinois. Why not? That's what you can do in the minority or the super minority is take a rhetorical position. Take a look at what congressional Democrats are doing at the federal level. Are they rolling in and saying, yes, well, we got to work with Trump and we got to work with Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell. So if they want big tax cuts and they want this Supreme Court nominee, then we're just going to have to work with them. No, they're not. They're digging in. Maybe it's time we learned a lesson from the other side, the side that's been dominating this state and this city for the better part of the last century and half century, respectively. Is that a possibility, or am I just I'm a lunatic again?
No one called you a lunatic.
Kristen.
We didn't call you a lunatic.
I've already explained where I stand on this at this moment. And again, you want to continue to just look at the tax hikes, fine. There is pension reform in here. There is workers' comp reform in here. You do have Cullerton backing Madigan into a corner here a little bit. I mean, in this state, anything that looks a little bit like progress, I just don't think at this moment in time that it should be a moment for the governor to come out and try to stand his ground. We've had 2 years of nothing. He's running again. Do you want to see him get reelected?
Yes,
I mean,
he's not. He's not
going to get reelected by just standing around and letting the state bleed out for another year and a half. He's not.
Well, he's not going to get reelected by destroying his brand. And if you capitulate to the other side, you destroy brand. That's what you do. He's the maverick outsider who's willing to stand against Republicans and Democrats, Republicans too, and say, no, we're not doing things the same old way. I came to town to shake up this state government and shake up this state. Is that what he's doing with what anything resembling what Cullerton and Radonio are trying to force feed through the Senate? That is not structural reform. That's not shaking anything up. It's an extension of the same.
I mean, you can say that, but there are pieces of his agenda in almost every one of these bills. Does it go as far as he wanted to go? No. But he came in wanting right-to-work zones, collective bargaining changes. He tried to take fair share away from union workers as one of his first acts of government. I mean, he has had to move off of the agenda that he came into. He's not going to get all of that out of a Democrat legislature. And I'm sorry that we have a democratically controlled legislature, but the only way to move forward or get something to his desk, even items of his agenda, is to get buy-in from them. And I'm sorry that's the way it is, but that's what we have in this state. There's no other way at this moment.
Go ahead.
He hasn't even said that he is on board with all these. He's just saying, keep talking. Keep talking. I don't think there's anything wrong with him doing that.
She is Kristen McQueary of the Chicago Tribune editorial board. Kristen, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's always fun.
Spirited. Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.